Some people trickling in. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, great. So for those who are joining, I feel like we should give it another minute because there are so many people trickling in. Okay, we're going to give it another minute. For those of you who are here, ignore that Warren is called Serena. Oh, there's Delphine. So welcome everyone who's joined. We're giving it just a minute so that we can trickle in new people. Wow. Are you hearing the dinging?
Okay. I think it's just us, Natalie, that we are blessed by this.
Serena, are you able to admit people?
I think so. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Are you able? Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to support with admission coordination?
No problem.
Okay,
I will
great.
keep my microphone open because I don't know if affects Warren's mic.
Okay, I think we got to give it one more minute because we have about 170 people who've registered. So welcome to everyone who's joined. Thanks so much for joining. We're going to give it just a little bit of time to let people trickle in. And we're really excited to have so many amazing, faces from all different parts of the world, from Cuba, Panama, Syria, Pakistan. We've really got the whole globe covered, which is really wonderful. I'm so happy that people are activated by these topics. So many people joining. Okay, great. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and start. So my name is Natalie Topa. I have joined WFP in June as the Global Advisor for Regenerative Resilience. I'm a headquarters staff, but I'm actually based in the Nairobi office, and I've been in the East Africa region for about 2 decades. In that time, I've seen landscapes, communities, vulnerabilities shift wildly, and so much of that is based on the ecological realities that we're seeing. I'm actually in a hotel room right now in Samburu, where we're here organizing the next ecosystem restoration boot camp. I'm super excited to hand it over to our director, Voli Carucci, who will introduce himself and help to open this because we're launching our regenerative speaker series. And Warren Brush is our first speaker, and the aim will be that we'll have, monthly or so presentations by people who are outside of our industry, who are not part of the UN, they're not part of the humanitarian world. We really want to invite in new ideas from people who are doing things that are related to the work we're doing that we can learn from, but who come from a different perspective. So with that, Voli Carucci, you come on in and introduce yourself. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Natalie. Your passion and enthusiasm already start invading the space. Fantastic. No, thank you very much. And thank you and to Warren for having accepted this invitation. We are the first of many, we hope, and hope to see you back even in the future. No, it's an excellent initiative, and thank you, Natalie, for having thought about this. And you bring a lot of that network, and let me start saying that this is a super important topic, very close to my personal heart since the last 35 and few years, but also very close to the heart of many of our staff who silently and solidly and in many places have pushed this agenda relentlessly. We have massive achievements. We don't necessarily, take a lot of credit for those, but that's okay. I think we need also to remain humble, particularly considering all the issues that we see around. But landscape restoration, ecosystems health, soil health, there's not going to be good diets or healthy diet without healthy soils. And as Natalie would say, and she said this word that really struck me a lot, soils are our main donor. Soil is our main donor, and it's true. And is an entity that is full of life, full of microbes and organisms and worms and all sorts of things from which we all depend. And all the ancient religion, keep us bringing back this notion of we are coming from dust and back to dust, and hopefully to be in a good compost pit somewhere, and yeah, it's a lot of work that I would like to also acknowledge from the colleagues online, from the Ethiopia and Kenya and the Sahel to the Central Latin America to the Afghanistan, the Pakistans, and counting. So there are many, and the Malawis and so on. So there are huge efforts being undertaken in this area of work. We need to be more systematic in documenting what works, but also be open-minded to other experience, to innovations that come from the field for the field, and that I think is an important thing to bear in mind. I just don't want to take too much time. I think the conversation or the points that you will be able to probably send online will be then the sequel of what we are going to hear now. Now the word is back to you, Natalie, and to Warren in a few seconds. Over. But welcome everybody.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Voli, and also thanks, Voli, for your passion and your vision. You're why I joined WFP, because I knew that there were people within the agency who are really committed to real resilience at an ecological level. As I said, I'm here in Samburu, and I often say that the forced, human activity causes forced migration of water. That leads to the forced migration of soil, and that leads to the forced migration of people. And today we were with the governor's office in Samburu County, he developed a manifesto. There are two main points in his manifesto. One is peace and the other is food security. And I think that shows how intrinsically tied those things are. Today we heard from the county government that some of the gullies in this huge county that's mostly pastoral, the gullies have grown so big that people are being displaced by the gullies. So that is really, goes to the point about water, soil, human migration. And I tell Voli that we do AI, right? Our asset creation is 100% focused on AI. But for me, AI is ancient innovation. Okay, so today, thanks, Warren, for joining us. Warren is going to take us through a presentation of work he's been doing around the world at different scales. We talk about regenerative. It's not only agriculture, it's about infrastructure, it's about so many other, just how we apply design thinking so we can get designed dividends and really partner with nature. And so Voli, Warren also, I talked to him about this concept as the soil as our donor as well, and you'll see that in the presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Warren, and we're still on time, 4:10. All right, thanks. I'm going to shut off the mic and enjoy the presentation. By the way, we don't have a chat room. This is a webinar rather than a Teams meeting. We do have a Q&A section. Feel free to drop questions in there. We're too many people, unfortunately, to have a mic. If we want to do some shared learning dialogues, reach out to me. I'm here as your resource person. We can have bilateral conversations anytime. But in the meantime, questions will be in that. At the end of the presentation, we'll go through some of those and lead a discussion between me, Voli, Warren, and read those questions off. Thanks a lot. Warren?
Thank you, Nat. Probably see I'm coming on the screen as Serena, so we had quite the technical difficulty this morning where we're at to be able to get me to access this, not being from the UN. So I want to thank Serena for sharing her name with me. Can you hear me okay, Nat? Are you hearing me? Okay, good. So I want to share a bit of the work that I've been doing, and how over the last 30 years I've been focusing on restoration and regeneration of agro ecosystems, and I want to get into a little bit about what that means. I'll come back around because you see the USAID logo on this first slide, and I'll share why I put that there, because it's been part of the development of the resilience design framework that I am one of the co-developers of. So let's just step back, and I want to take more of a meta view, and building on what Natalie shared about soils are our main donor. I want to step back and build on that and say nature is our most critical donor and partner. And what does that mean? For me, it's that every economy is dependent on ecology. Like, we cannot have ecology, we cannot have an economy without a vibrant ecology. As you start to see the degradation of an ecological system that's supporting people, their economy will also start to degrade. And that could be the economy of nutrition, the economy of income, also looking at the economy of water. So there's a lot of ways of looking at that. And it really is the foundation of asset creation, and community resilience is about a healthy natural system. And it's important to think of, as we start to look and say, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to have nature as a donor and a partner? Well, it has to do with natural patterning and understanding that whenever we push against nature, it's going to cost us energy in one form or another. It's going to cost us, it could be our time, it could be money, it could be degradation of a structure because we put a structure in a way that actually pushes against the natural system. So when we talk about nature as our most critical donor, it's not this this lofty thought. It's actually very practical when it comes down to our designs on the ground. Now, continuing on in that thought, when we start to look at climate resilience, and I know there's been probably some of you who are here today, and I want to thank you for joining us. Some of you were a part of the African Climate Summit held in Nairobi last month, or the Climate Week in New York City just happened. And one of the things we're seeing is, like, both of these events shifted this year. They went from talking about carbon credits, as they have in the past, to actually the need to restore and protect natural systems and biodiversity, and how that is critical for climate resilience. So often we're talking about climate change and this large kind of inaccessible thought of, climate is happening to us. Yet so much of how we experience climate changes, and just climate in general, has to do with the level of intactness of our landscape. So the more a land is degraded, the more it amplifies negative climate issues that are going on. So what we're seeing is that the flood drought cycle is often experienced because of land degradation, not so much as the larger climate issues that are going on. So what that tells us as a designer is that we have to start to look at how to reverse land degradation as a way to address climate resilience. And climate resilience, like, I've seen climate smart agriculture projects that are talking about, oh, just add mulch. Well, that simplified approach to climate resilience is not going to get us to this place of reversing land degradation. It takes a multifaceted design approach of a whole site. And so we'll get into that. Often when I'm on the ground with different communities, I'm working with agencies, I'm working with USAID, I'm working with Danita, I'm working with a lot of different donors, and there's these lofty resilience definitions. And so I put this one from the UNDRR, where resilience is the ability of a system, community, or society exposed to hazards to resist, absorb, accommodate to, and recover from the effects of a hazard in a timely and efficient manner, including through the preservation and restoration of its of its essential basic structures and functions. And I think, you know, that's great if you're sitting in a hotel room. But when you take that definition out into the community, I think it's really interesting if you bring that up with a group of farmers and they're like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? What is, you know, this doesn't have to do with me, so to speak. But what I like to look at is when you go out there is what does resilience actually look like when you're walking in a landscape? And here you can see this picture of a bioswale. This is an on-contour bioswale that was in an area that was completely degraded, had been monocropped with eucalyptus. A lot of the farmers in the area said, nothing's going to grow here. But we basically built resilience into a heavily degraded system. And what we talk about here is that resilience looks like, you could be thinking about this as well while you're sitting there watching this. What does resilience look like on the ground to you? To me, these are a few of the things that I look at when I walk out into a community. It's that, is there an integrated whole site design? Is there hydrological stability, meaning that there's no erosion, that there's earthworks with ground covers and plants creating a living sponge? Is there rainwater banked and protected in the soils? Are there living soils, or are the soils dead and exposed to the sun? What's the level of organic matter? Is there deep soil preparation in the food bed, in the production beds? Is the soils protected and covered with a diversity of mulches? Are there animal integration? Is there perennial fertility? Are the plants themselves, and I think this is important because looking at WFP having the primary focus being food security, one of the things I see often programs miss is actually nutrient density in the plants themselves. And it takes a living soil, it takes a banked rainwater in the soils to actually create the optimal conditions for a plant to take up the macro and micronutrients. A lot of the work that we were asked to do for USAID came out of the basically data that was showing stunting in a lot of the food programs that USAID was promoting, and yet the calories were there. There were calories. Everybody was getting the calories they needed with the food, but they were still stunting. And so a team of us back in 2014 were brought together to look at how to create food that actually is nutrient dense. And it came back around to soil and water and biodiversity. And so we presented our approach to USAID in Washington, D.C., and basically bringing in permaculture, agroforestry, agroecology, rainwater harvesting. And what some of you should look into if you haven't already is called the soil food web, to look at how to create a living soils that actually facilitates nutrient uptake in the plants, which not only give better nutrition, but also give those plants disease and pest resistance. So right at the core, it came back to our practices, a good agronomic practices on the ground, as well as looking at the whole agro ecosystem and how to work with the infrastructure and how to facilitate restoration and regeneration in the soils around every project that we were working in. And so we started to develop an approach that could be used by larger organizations that were using cascading models. And so we basically developed a set of principles that drive design. So this idea that designing a whole site based on the context of the site is very different for a lot of these programs, because they were based on more looking at standards driven, that they're basically coming in and saying, here are these 3 strategies or these 3 techniques, and we want you to do those 3 techniques. But it didn't teach the process of working with slope, working with the sun, working with the rainfall, working with pathways and hardscape, and all of the different unique kind of influences that happen on a site. and then how to do it through a community engagement process where the wisdom of the community could be a part of the design process and would be harvested uniquely based on that community's own understanding of their landscape. And then it basically looked at how you first stabilize the hydrology, and then you build living soils, and then from that you get an ecologically beneficial biodiversity while only using local resources. So all of that principle-driven design process started to come together in what we call resilience design approach. And over the last, gosh, it's been 9 years now, we have a variety of different donors that have adopted this, and different implementers in 17 different countries who have started to use the resilience design approach, which is basically permaculture, and yet it's in a framework that works for programs that are cascading in communities. Now, how does it work? Well, it has the same principles moving from different scales. The smallest kind of integer of this is the home garden, or what we call the permagarden. And it's interesting, and I'll walk you through each of these. The permagarden, USAID has said it is one of the top 5 strategies for their food security programs, that they have found it is so effective in bringing food immediately to people. We have worked in refugee camps, I'll share about this, where food is available to eat or sell within 10 days of planting because of the conditions that we create. So basically this home permagarden, this household level, then we move to the farm level, then we move to the community level, and then the same principles can be applied even to a large watershed to start to actually drought-proof a watershed. And we always look at the watersheds as a lifeboat, that if each watershed in itself could have a plan that works from the top down, you can start to remap that system's production and also climate resilience by working watershed to watershed. And we tested this on 17 mountains in South Kivu in Congo. And there's some great data that came out of actually applying this for an entire mountain, and how it affected all the communities, and actually it allowed for land that had been written off as no longer arable to actually be highly productive by using some of these techniques. So how do we do this? Well, we work with teams. Like, this is a Mercy Corps program that I did in Timor, and I'm still working with them, but we do a field-based trainer of trainers. We have an intense community engagement process. And as Natalie will show you, Natalie and I have worked a lot on this, and she's been very influential to the USAID programming as well over the years through her work that she did prior to the United Nations. She was also doing work with the Danish Refugee Council, and a lot of the programs that we did together really inform this. And I love the one of the things Natalie calls it, she's great with words, and she talks about that this isn't a workshop, this is a work hard shop. And it's true. When we get out there, we spend the first few days in a classroom, but then we are out in the field for basically 10 days doing the work that we just learned in the classroom. So every single time we do a trainer of trainers, we actually leave a demonstration site. And we talk about the 3 key aspects of RD moving out into the world is demonstration, and the third and most important is demonstration. So we always have these 3 things that are the most critical for a community to actually shift into restorative and regenerative practices. And until you can demonstrate it, people don't adopt things easily. And I know a lot of you out there have experienced that in the past, where you can talk and talk and talk, but until it's demonstrated, it doesn't, people aren't adopting it. And then the other piece that we are really keen on doing is this, what we call technical quality control mentoring, where we're actually mentoring. And I'm going to wrap this whole presentation at the end talking about a little bit about how we do that mentoring, this technical mentoring, because as many of you who are engineers know, that you technically have to be right on. So as you do the design, you work with the principles, and then you decide the techniques and strategies that you're using. You then have to do it technically sound. And so that's a big part of what we train. So I'm going to walk you through the different scales of the resilience design approach, starting with the household permagarden. And I'm going to give you, kind of show you a little bit of how they look. This is a refugee settlement in Uganda, this picture here. And it's, basically the resilience design process is a participatory approach. When we talk about the permagarden, we don't just separate it from the household. The household is a production area. And imagine if you're in a camp scenario, whether it's a settlement or an IDP or a refugee camp, having your waste streams at your house cycle into food production becomes a really important part of creating diverse nutrition that can be grown immediately, and also often becomes one of the most important weekly income sources. So having often programs that are promoting cropping systems for income, they only get to harvest the crop once a season. And what permagarden, what we design in that is that, there's amaranth greens, there's cowpeas, there's sweet potatoes, there's a diversity of different things that are a part of that system, that a little bit could be eaten every day and a little bit could be sold every week, so that there's a trickle of income to help people through. The other thing that we can do is utilize our wastewater within this system so that we have year-round production. So I'll show you a couple examples of that, and then integrating waste. So even the sweepings of our compound are high in organic matter, bird manure, which is high in phosphorus, and you've got a mix of different nutrients that you can pick up and utilize. So here's a picture in a refugee settlement of a new arrival, and they come in, the land's been cleared, very degraded, and then we start to build with them and teaching the process and the principles of it, because the key with working with refugees that we found is that we want them to understand it. So hopefully when they go back to where they had to flee from or where they were displaced from, they can actually bring these back home. So the refugee camps actually become this place of synergy of teaching these processes so that they can go back out into their communities, whether like in this one in northern Uganda, they're going back to South Sudan or to the Congo. And so once they learn the principles, one, they can use them immediately, but then they have them for the rest of their lives. And we're finding a lot of people are taking what they've learned in these trainings and what they've done on the ground there back to where they originally came from. So part of the key of this is we're using local resources. We're also building perennial fertility. So this idea of growing your own fertility, it becomes a really important part of resilience, because if we are just looking at if we're just looking at having this kind of linear system of inputs coming from far away, and often, if it's coming from far away, it's chemical based. So right off the bat, you're starting to destroy the soil biology, even by putting a chemical fertilizer in the soils. And there's great studies showing how that actually causes you to need fertilizer each year. Rather than becoming independent of it, you become dependent of it. And so if we're truly looking at resilience for communities, we have to wrap our heads and our designs around building perennial fertility in our systems with natural materials. This is one of the permagardens in that refugee camp. That's kind of how it looked before in one particular refugee settlement. And there was a tiny little jackfruit tree. They hadn't done any improvement to slow spread and sink the water. In fact, this household was getting flooded. So oftentimes what we find in doing resilience design and permaculture is that we're actually reducing the disaster risk for people. So we're turning floods into food. And so here's that same compound after we've done micro earthworks throughout the compound. Now, this is where we learn, this is where the farmer learns the principles on a small scale. That's why often we teach before we go into the farm level scale of resilience design, we teach at the household so that they can understand the principles and they can understand how that system works through the dry season before they start to expand into their larger farming system. So this is in a refugee camp doing dry season production. And what we've found is that there's a lot of impact studies are coming back that are talking about the increase in primary dry season income, the increase in food consumption, the decrease on reliance on WFP rations. This was one particular study, and then improvements in household nutrition. Natalie and I did a program in Dolo, Somalia, where people said nothing will grow here, and it was it was like 43 degrees outside, and just incredibly hot. And what we found, what we found is that we had germination in 3 days, and they were shocked. And within 5 weeks, they already had really good growth. And they said even in 2 weeks, they could eat the amaranth greens that were growing. So right off the bat, they were getting food. So this idea that a garden can't produce for a really long time is just not true. We are doing immediate production and success with that. And so then we start to take what we've learned in the household and we move it out to the farm. And so again, we choose demonstration sites that often programs look for the best farmer in the area with the most advantageous land, and then they say, oh, we want to have you as our demonstration site because it already looks green, it already looks good. And then they show their donor, look how good this is. Well, what we found is if we want adoption in our programs, we choose the worst site with the least advantages and the people with the most need. And so this particular program in Kabondo, Tanzania, we chose a single mom with little financial resources living at the top of a hill, not the bottom land, but the top of a hill where there was a lot of different erosion. There was very poor growing conditions. And you can see here, this is just all the resources were going away. They were designed by the road engineers to actually shed water all through that system. And so her farm was actually, every rainfall, rather than feeding the farm, was actually diminishing the farm. And so we went in and we started looking at all the different influences of what was going on. We saw that the compaction was bad, that there was concentrated water flows, that even her furrows for her growing systems were off contour, causing erosion further into the gully, and she had poor growth because of that. So as part of our Trainer of Trainers program, we went in and we did this whole community engagement process. We did a design. We laid it all out and we taught the farmers how to do that. And we basically started to do multiple strategies within a single farm. So here we're starting to build what we call a food forest. Now, I think every WFP program should be looking at food forest as a part of stabilizing the food systems in a community and on a farm, because it is a perennial forest production system that is loaded with food, fodder, fuel, and fertility plants that can feed all the rest of the systems year round. And it is, again, the key word here is perennial. Here we're doing microstructures that are what we call smile berms. and we're building the soil base in an area that was heavily eroded, and basically creating a net to capture the rain, to capture the nutrient running off of her household. So there was all these missed opportunities that were causing degradation in her farm. We were turning the story around through good engineering to basically turn that erosion into production. And we did that by slowing, spreading, sinking, and banking the rainwater and the nutrients that are carried by the water itself, and using what we call bioswales. So these are living systems working with the contour. Just putting a structure in the ground and not adding biology to it doesn't make it regenerative. It's the living system that actually gives it the capacity to continue to generate the benefits over time. So the root netting that happens in the bioswale is so necessary to make sure that structure is always functioning. And so that's why we actually call them bioswales. And then we start to interlink those systems. So here is the compound. There's that food forest that we were using, and then below that is the bioswale. So here we have the food forest next to the house. We then have the farm below where we're doing bioswales, and we're actually building structures to grow three-dimensionally. So often what we can do is by creating the systems that have a lot of nutrient, a lot of water, we can actually grow more intensively and three-dimensionally. And so here we start to see that we can increase the amount of production on the same bit of land. For 25 to 50% more production could happen on the same farm. It's like Denise's farm expanded, like she just got more land, but it was the same amount of land, just that we were designing it in a way where she could grow more food on it. So here is that food forest system up near the land. The trees are planted, everything's planted out, and then the farm is done in an alley cropping system below. And basically within a few weeks, she had nutritious food. Some of the feedback we've got from her system is that she now has year-round income, and within 2 years, she said her pest and disease issues diminished almost completely, where she doesn't have any pest or disease issues because she got her soil biology creating healthy plants. Her nutrient levels in her plants went up. She grows more food than she needs and sells the produce, the seeds, and plant stocks. She works less now, and basically to maintain the whole system. And she has higher profits because one, she can sell some of her produce in the off season where other people can't grow because their system can't grow in the dry season. Her system produces even in drought conditions, as I was saying. And she has now become a community trainer without support from any program. She's doing this on her own. She's no longer with the Danish Refugee Council. She's just a community trainer because people see that she's actually doing this really well. So this is 2 years after implementation. That's the food forest. You can see that to the left of that kitchen area is where all this water now you can see flows into the system that's now productive. And throughout her farm, she has a diversity of main crops growing with a mix. You can see Tithonia up in the left-hand corner, the yellow-flowered sunflower-looking plant is that plant we make biofertilizers with. She has chicken integration systems. She has ground cover. She has perennial fruit vines that are growing. And what's happened is that 2 years after implementation, she has completely moved out of her place of poverty, both ecologically, but also from an income and nutrition standpoint. Now, we see this over and over again. This is a program that we worked with doing resilience design it's an Elevate program with BHA in Zimbabwe. Even after one year, we're seeing, basically the farmer with 1 ton per hectare results in the first year, and then after applying resilience design was getting 3.5 tons per hectare in the same area, because we've restructured it and we've created a system that allows for the natural, what is that? The nature as our donor to actually partner with us to create a stable and climate resilient system. So then we move to the community scale, and here you see some of these pictures are also covers of resources. So this is a resource that we call Resilience Design for Water and Landscapes, and creating a sponge village in this one particular area in northern Uganda. And here is a very kind of a pictorial view of this landscape, and basically creating a community-wide system of slowing, spreading, sinking, and banking water into those soils, excuse me, by doing different types of integrated earthworks, dam building, both working with integrating the dams into the landscape. This is a particular type of dam called a contour dam. So it's on contour, but it's not in the valley. So it's actually protected from being washed out, but then it's linked with bioswales to pick up the water and increase its catchment area. So this is a strategy that actually creates very well protected dams that are not susceptible to flooding. Basically, this system can't actually blow out because of the way we've structured it. And we're even doing hand dug dams and doing cash for work programs, or resource assets for work programs. And then looking at how to work with infrastructure, the NURI program, which is actually changing to the Uganda Resilience Initiative, URI. They've received additional, or they're about to receive additional funding. But the idea of taking infrastructure, where so often our engineers will make a road, and the standard is that you go 3 meters away from the road with any drainage, and then you're no longer responsible for it. You've moved it 3 meters away from the road. Well, what happens is that concentrated water and nutrient causes flooding in nearby areas. The infrastructure is impacted by that flooding oftentimes. And here we're doing a project in a very diminished area where there was a main road that was very poorly planned by the engineers, and it flooded every single year, and they couldn't get to market during the rainy season when they had a lot of their produce, and it was a huge impact. And so we went in and said, let's link the infrastructure to agriculture. Let's protect the infrastructure through creating an agro ecosystem that's actually slowing, spreading, sinking, and banking the rainwater. And so here we're working both with machinery and with hand labor. So we're combining the different strategies and the different approaches of how we build these techniques into the ground. So a lot of times the farming communities can learn how to work on the smaller scale by hand digging, and then we can stabilize the larger area using machinery. And so here we actually pulled the water away that was flooding. Rather than having it flood, it actually goes out into an aquaculture system that basically within 9 months was completely vegetated, was working perfectly. The dam had filled within 9 months, and now they have this resource for water in their community. The livestock in the community were having to leave because of lack of water, and now they can stay year round in the community. So there's less disruption to the family unit because the men would leave with the livestock, and now the livestock can stay. And then right around that, we were seeing that the community members were having more of a sponge for their rice production. And so here, one of the community members said it's the best rice yield they've ever had after this structure went in, where just the season before it was a flooding issue that was a real disaster for their community. We then take that same process and we designed in where we did this to actually recharge a borehole that would go dry occasionally. And what I've heard is since then, it has never gone dry. And so here you can see the system is recharging the active recharge area. And I think that's really important to think of when we start to look at, we dig boreholes everywhere, but then we don't have a recharge plan. And I think that is one of the big difficulties we are seeing with this idea of bringing people water, is that they're not actually looking at nature's recharge system and how you keep that alive and working. I was in Zimbabwe recently, and they had 800 boreholes in this one area, and 600 of them were dry. And it's because not a single agency had considered the recharge of the system. So they drained it down, and then the whole system desertified because of that. And it just is, it's something we have to think of. We have to think in whole systems. If you're doing agriculture, you also must be thinking of doing nature restoration for the area to make sure that the water resources are there. So what we've done, so those are different scales that we've worked at. We decided to look beyond BHA, the Bureau of Humanitarian Affairs, that had short-term funding, to develop a long-term demonstration, training, and research center in regenerative agriculture using resilience design. And so we partnered with a regional organization that had been working in the community where Palabek refugee settlement is. And they had been working in the community before the refugee settlement was even there. So they are long-term, 15 years there. And we were able to get, through the Office of the Prime Minister, we were able to get a 15 or a 5-hectare piece of land that is within the refugee settlement as a long-term research site and demonstration site, and where we could also build a training center. And we have a 15-year commitment from the owners of the land, so that it's this long-term research and long-term demonstration site, which is very unique in the NGO world, as you all know. Usually funding cycles are much shorter than that. And the other unique part of this is that, I know many of you are looking at ways to help to regionalize a lot of the program delivery. And with working with AWR, it's very unique, is that their staff almost exclusively all come from the camp or the host community, which I think is very unique. Of course, they don't have degrees, and very few of them have degrees from the university, but many of them have a lot of experience farming. And so they have experience working in the community. And some of them were refugees who then came through the programming, did literacy programming coupled with agriculture, and then came out and worked for African Women Rising. And so we chose this organization because they are effective and they're really efficient with their funding. And they're there long term, which I can't say for a lot of the organizations that have come in following the money trail when the camp got set up. They've come in and they've done some things that just haven't worked well. So we're modeling something different for refugee camps. So we were literally put right up next to the United Nations compound, the Office of the Prime Minister, and the Finnish Refugee Council. We got this land that they said nothing would grow. The landowner said, oh yeah, we only harvest rocks here. That's it. There's we don't even bring our animals here anymore. And so with the community there and the staff at African Women Rising, we went through a design process, which is what we do wherever we do this work. And we basically came up with a co-design that had the local community's input at the center of the design. And basically that's what it looked like when we first got it. And within 1 year, we had already stabilized the hydrology. A borehole is there now where it doesn't diminish at all because the water that's there. We have alley cropping systems. I'm going to kind of go through what that looks like and basically how we just started this a year and a half ago, and we've looked at, how do we stabilize the hydrology using bioswales, using some heavy equipment for the larger areas of remediation, and then doing smaller handwork in between the larger structures that we were doing. So here you can see a excavator doing a bioswale that is basically slowing, spreading, sinking, and banking water into the ground as it snakes across the land in a contour. You can see that we also do three-dimensional growing here. And here you can see now, this is just after the first season of growth. You can see the water that was harvested. That was all water causing damage on the landscape, causing erosion, stealing nutrient or organic matter, causing flooding and silting of the rivers further away. So all this externalized damage that was happening beforehand, now that water and nutrient is staying, and because it's on contour, it just sinks into the ground and slowly starts to make its way down slope in a way that feeds all the biology. And so here you have this incredible diverse system of growth growing. And at this point, you still can't see the trees that are coming up. I mean, we literally had papayas and bananas fruit within 9 months growing. We have, I think we have 26 types of fruit trees growing on our bioswales, in addition to shrubs and ground covers, and just layered with food, and then also fertility. The other thing that we did is we established a nursery. We're building a training center. It's actually done now. This is an older photo. And some of you who are on this call might be joining us for a training that we're doing there later this month. I think we have about 20 plus staff from different UN missions that are going to be joining us for a resilience design trainer of trainers. This is the building that we'll actually be in. And you'll see also that the way we design this, if you end up coming there at some point and doing a training with us, is that the sun never hits the windows. The sun never hits the walls. And so we designed it so that it doesn't need air conditioning units because the way that we're working with it. And we're actually integrating a geo air conditioning system that uses the coolness in the depth of the land to help to keep that building cool. So here is that training site with the nursery. And what we found, especially in refugee camps, is there's a lack of basically plant stock. And so when we first started planting out our bioswales there, people were coming and stealing, different plant cuttings. And what we found was, can you still hear me, Natalie? Okay, sorry, I think one of my
Absolutely, Warren, you loud and clear. Lima Charlie.
Okay, great. Still, okay, good. Thank you. I think one of my earphones just lost its power, but the Life Regeneration Hub idea is that in the refugee camp, there's not a lot of plant stock. So what we realized is that having a demonstration farm in every single refugee camp that also produces the plant and animal stock that's needed to help populate people's food growing systems is essential, because there's just a lack of plants and seeds that are needed to actually have a regenerative system. And so we are starting to look at how to do that in a refugee context using this site. And then we demonstrate through training. And so here we're teaching people how to do a food forest, and basically building a 3-acre food forest using what we call fractals. So they learn how to do 3 structures that could be replicated on their 30 by 30 meter site that each one is given in this settlement. And here you can see we're putting together, this site that has
a mix of larger structures that are planting the rain, and we love to use that terminology, is that don't let the rain run away. We pray for the rain when there's a drought, and in the dry season we're praying for the rain, and then the rain comes and it doesn't have a home. So we want to plant the rain and give the rain a home. And so when we talk about going back around to what regeneration looks like on the ground, this is the start of it. This is the generative processes of engineering that we do at different scales that actually create resilience on the ground for a household, for a community, or even larger, for an entire watershed. Here, even a small structure can gather hundreds of liters of water in a small rain, and then you couple that with the larger landscape as well. And then we look and we say, okay, you know, it also is about building living soils. So this idea of creating fast carbon pathways that build soils in the ground that are living and that can actually translate to nutrient density and higher levels of production and the ability to actually grow biointensively, so that each area that we're growing has a lot of diverse nutritional sources, and it can maintain that nutrition through time because we're growing the organic matter to maintain that system. These are alley cropping systems that we're doing there in the community as well. We were just given, basically, we were just given over 100 acres of land by the Office of the Prime Minister, because they're seeing what we're doing on the site to actually grow out with 100 farmers, each of them with 1 acre within the community using these techniques. It's very, very exciting. And part of that is that we are creating long-term research of this, and we've basically have built in a large part of our research. And I think this is a great area where we might be able to work with you, Natalie and Voli, around, you know, collaborating on research around regenerative practices on the ground. Right now, this next training, NASA is sending a representative to help us develop a lot of our relationships with them and some of the local partners like Gulu University. We're also looking at getting Tufts involved as well to help us in long-term research of how these processes play out. So here, if we, you know, kind of cap this presentation, this resilience design process we've been doing for 9 years. We've developed a whole series of regenerative agriculture support materials that can be found on the Food Security Network. There's a regenerative agriculture page that has, if you go to FSN, they have and you look up regenerative agriculture, there's a whole series of support materials that are manuals, there's training guides, there's research, there's all these different support materials that give a better idea of our process, including how we've found mentoring teams in the field after we do the TOT. So when we're actually doing this work in the field, we don't just do a TOT and then walk away. It really is important that how we structure from the proposal all the way through to the implementation to throughout the whole cascade, that there's really strong exposure of the trainers to multiple trainings, that they get experience in the field, working in teams. There's technical mentoring from experts in the field. We've been doing starting to work at what we call the T3 level, which is the trainer of trainers of trainers. So people who can come into an organization and actually start from scratch with that organization and to teach the trainer of trainer programs. And so we've been doing more of that. We have more people geared up to do that, and really looking at how we technically support teams through the cascade and how to monitor and evaluate regenerative agriculture agriculture. It's not simple, and that's part of the issue around the research as well, is in an industrial system is so simplified that it's easier to set up a research project than when you have, 50 influences because you've done a whole site design. It's hard to actually build the research around it. And so that's one of the things that NASA is really excited about, is looking at how we can utilize whole system design in building research that comes back around to tell us, okay, is nutrition being increased? Is the land actually regenerating? Is the water shed actually recharging? And it's just very exciting time right now. And so I'm going to wrap with that. I wanted to share my contact information. You can see my email addresses there, also websites. That is the link to the FSN network, is the Resilient Agriculture link with all of these resources. And I want to thank you all. I hope I didn't talk too fast for some of you who English might not be your first language, or just too fast at all, but I really wanted to get as much in as I possibly could. And I'm going to hand it back to you, Natalie, and just thank you all very much for your time today.
Thanks, Warren. I mean, Warren is our first speaker, and I know the breadth of things he's been doing. So I said, contrary to popular requests, I said, no, let's give Warren time to really present a lot of different ideas. So this is a longer presentation. Other ones may not be as long. Is anyone able to raise a hand by any chance? I've tried to enable. Okay. Oh, Voli, great job. So I'm gonna ask Voli to kind of respond and sort of bridge Warren's presentation. Obviously, there are huge similarities with the work we're doing in asset creation, which is amazing. We have an incredible portfolio. We've got, this whole time we've had over 90 people on the call, and in so many parts of the world, people are actively doing amazing work. So we're looking at how do we take it to the next level, and hopefully the speaker series will, entice us, inspire us to add on and to take it to the next level. I have included a bunch of resources. Warren, towards the end, people are going to ask for details on the training. I was mentioning, Warren and I have been doing these trainings together for years, and then I was like conflicted. Should I join WFP or should I stay rolling around in the dirt? So the good thing is I get to roll around in the dirt with WFP. Yeah, there's lots of initiatives we've been doing together. So I'm going to hand it over to Voli just to sort of respond. And Warren, look at Voli's background. We've been doing huge restorative stuff, in different parts of the world. So Voli, as our leader, is our dirty leader for soil and all things, life and restorative action. What's your response? Does this jive? How do we link this this narrative and these lessons with the work that we're trying to do? Voli?
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you very much, Warren, for this great, super presentation. I want to get out of this place, frankly speaking. I'm just built 2 years and 29 days and 3 hours of of being here since I left the Sahel. But just to say that this is great stuff, and I think we are all like partners in rolling with the dirt type of people, and or rolling with the dirt beyond borders. So I think that we need to be I mean, this is a great exchange, and it really meets a lot of our expectations in terms of sharing experience. I mean, we had some great intuitions that we saw there, original designs. It will probably be a very fun conversation between me, you, and Jonathan, Samson, and Lemus, and many others, on the shapes of different things. And you, Natalie, too? No, really. So it on all sorts of things, but really fantastic job. And we We are very interested also because we are increasingly facing with this, incredible correlation, and you highlighted this many times, between hunger or recurrent food insecurity, malnutrition, hardships, a lot of hardships, and land degradation and high exposure to any climate variation, let alone the climate extremes that we are seeing increasingly happening. Besides, as WFP, we're working largely, let's say 70-80% of our operations are in dry lands or heavily moisture stressed areas, right? So we see also a huge need to actually harvest or capture every single drop that falls. Actually, we have what do you call it, water literacy and land literacy concept to read, interpret whatever falls from the sky and whatever received from the ground, just to host that precious commodity and trying to make the best use of it, right? So clearly speaking a lot for the big agendas that hit the people that we are supporting on the ground. I don't like to use the term beneficiaries. I mean, I always felt uncomfortable. Actually, we benefit a lot more from them. And I think the world can turn things around. We are going to be the biggest beneficiaries of those that we call beneficiaries if we have those landscapes back to life. And they could teach a lesson of unprecedented proportions to all of us. So it's a collective endeavor and a partnership, because if regenerative agriculture or regenerative resilience means also about relationship between people, landscapes, and with hope and aspiration and the desire to actually, make people and planet a better place. So without getting into the rhetoric, I really would like to thank you a lot. I have many questions, but I'd like to retain a number of things. That agroecology is a new business model. It's not new. It has been there. It's for a long time. We use different terms. Sometimes we need to be careful on the terminology, not to abuse also the green the green side of the moon, so that we are also careful in adjectives there. Many people have spoken about or have done a number of these things, calling them maybe using more traditional terms, but nonetheless at the same level, sometimes at an incredible scale. And we need to perhaps see also the evolution of some of these models. Sometimes entry point could be simple activities, but then move into the next one and to the next one. So there's a sequencing there that's super important. I like your emphasis on the mentoring side, on how to accompany that approach over time. So the ability also for organizations like WFP and others to hand over, not to remain permanently in the same place for 10 years. I've seen NGOs enjoying that kind of game, but also agencies that have been there and celebrating, oh, we have been here 50 years. Excuse me, there is a problem. So it's a little bit of that tension. So how to bring this to scale through the also one part that I recognize as has been very strongly in our approach is how to influence. You influence the prime minister or the minister there. You influence decision makers. You influence people. So it's not only that hyper focus on, let's say, individuals or household, but also systems. So we need to find a way to bring it up, and to bring it up as something attractive, beneficial for everybody, is a win-win for everyone. So it's not something that you can lose. Last thing, one of the last things, but super important, and Natalie knows that I've been fighting this like since many years, but even more recently, this idea of separating water from soil, from biodiversity, and so on. We need to bring this as one. And soil, water, air, climate, biodiversity is one, let's say, part of one recipe, and they need to be properly mixed, because we have seen this borehole maniacal focus, on everybody with the same straw in the same glass of water. and I've seen this in the Merti aquifer in Wajir, county in Kenya. It's insane, with half of the boreholes in disrepair, and more boreholes being drilled. and then dry it up after a few years. So you need to recharge. Nature is like a big bank account with a lot of good positive credits, being provided to you if you treat it well. So we need to kind of, and this is not from my quote, this is from an old farmer in somewhere in Tigray years ago, when he said that this now is our bank account. So we're taking wisely the credits out, but we replenish with, we benefit from the interest rates. It was from a farmer, and who explained the resilience outcomes much better than any of us, with all these long definitions and statements. So yeah, thank you very much. I will end up saying that we are creating also a lot of networking, not only with farmers that we like to identify and champion. We believe innovation comes from the bottom in the first place, not from somewhere in a capital, God knows where else, but from the bottom, but also from academia in those countries. So we have a network now with over 16 universities, local universities in Africa. Is a legalized network now in West Africa, for example, very powerful. As an example, 150 already master 2 level degree students who deployed in those sites, learn from those sites, measure all sorts of things. So that's great stuff. And we are expanding now in Eastern Africa and Southern Africa region. So all huge potential there. So yeah, let's continue this networking. I'm very attracted by the AWR and also to the thinking that we need to open up new grounds on the refugee, on the small space development, and how to link it with a host. All those relationships that are pretty much broken in many ways, in many areas, needs to be reestablished. Again, I stop here. Otherwise, I will be continuing and people will be upset. So any reaction from any colleague or a quick response from your side, I will continue firing up a few slides just for le plaisir des yeux, pleasure of your eyes. Cheers.
Thanks so much, Voli. I'm so excited about the work that we've been doing at WFP, but we also have a lot of introverts. So the story doesn't get told. And Voli could give an amazing presentation about the work. You see that Merti watershed in Ethiopia as Voli's background. Some of our team members were involved in that. And I love the idea, Voli, Jonathan used the term today, social fencing. So social fencing is an agreement, it's an accord with the community that they're dedicated to letting some land rest and heal. So I'm so happy to sort of smash my worlds together. We're all with the same vision, unified about the work that needs to be done. And everybody has different contexts. We've got Felix. Hi, Felix. I think Felix had a question about, am I able to unmute Felix? Let's see.
Yeah, this webinar saying,
I don't know.
Can you unmute?
Yeah.
Can you type your question, Felix, eventually?
So Felix did have a question, and he said, I observed that most of the resilience design appears to be more in hilly or at least sloping landscapes. Do these techniques apply for lands that are flat? And Oren will tell you there's no such thing as flat in nature except underwater. Always water will move a little bit somewhere, but I've just shared, Felix, there are places in South Sudan that are really special ecological zones. The whole of Greater Upper Nile region, Bentiu, Malakal, Upper Nile, Jonglei, Unity, all of those areas are super unique, really unique. But as Warren will say, and I will let Warren answer, what we're talking about are really principle-based, not this is how you must do it and this dimension and this, specifications. What I hope is that I can be a resource person and our team and our whole unit to help all of our teams around the world really read landscapes and apply some design principles on how we apply design to solve some of those problems that are totally bespoke. We can't do, I know I'm learning new things, how we do things in WFP, but I would never go to a home and say, here's how you do a kitchen garden. I'm asking, where's the sunshine? Where's the shade? Which way does the wind blow? Where's the water moving? How do we stop it? We want parking lots of water, not super highways. And so we're applying those design principles. You can go to 10 homesteads, 10 farms, 10 landscapes, have totally different design approaches based on those principles. So I'll share what I've done in South Sudan, borrowing again from AI, ancient innovation, Bangladesh, floating gardens using hyacinth, which is abundant in South Sudan, very mineral rich biomass for composting, also borrowing from the Chinampas, the ancient Aztec people of Mexico, also lived in a kind of South Sudan type of environment, super elevated. So what they did is they made these elevated island beds, and I'll put a link into those YouTube channels. A link to my YouTube channel, which is just Natalie Topa, where I share the things I've done in South Sudan, specifically in that greater Upper Nile sump, that low point in the watershed. On that point, I just want to say one thing. The whole entire Nile River basin, the flooding we have in South Sudan, people scream it's climate change. I've been working in South Sudan for 20 years. We've had a growing middle class. All of the urban metropolitan areas are becoming more and more paved, more concrete. That means we're removing the trees, the sponge that absorb water, and we're putting concrete, which increases runoff, plus intensified animal energy in the landscape, plus returnees, millions of returnees coming and then going and coming back in South Sudan due to this really volatile stability issues. So more people coming in, cutting trees, clearing farms, building homes, selling charcoal. So the whole point is, how do we think about design in any context that we work? Somebody wrote integration is key. That's Faj. Faj is here, is a participant, and we're really talking a lot also with the civil engineers. Warren presented on the sponge village. I really wanted to do a sponge village, and I said to Warren, let's do this. We've had 6 machines, 200 people, 10 days, and we transformed a pastoral village that was subject to major extreme events and violent water behavior and total food and water insecurity, and created a situation where they have permanent water security. And as Warren said, with dams that are interconnected in a fill and spill circuit, not at the bottom of the valley. So I would really challenge us to think about the way that we're doing like dams. So there's two kinds of, I would say there's two kinds of earthworks or passive water harvesting earthworks and stoneworks: infiltration and retention. And there can be a hybrid as well, and that's where we did a blend of those. But coming back to the point, Warren is from East Timor to East Africa, applying those design principles. So in any agroecological context, in any type of environment, in any type of landscape, we're trying to jump onto the moving bus that is nature to harvest the goodness. We can ask, is water good or bad? Well, it's good if it's enough, and it's bad if it's too much, right? Is sunshine a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it's great if you want to grow tomatoes, not so great if you're crawling through the Sahara Desert on your belly. So in design, we want to ask, how do we harvest the goodness but mitigate the harshness so that we're creating an enabling environment and microclimates for food, biodiversity, healthy living soils? And I sent this to Boli today or yesterday. I don't know if anybody knows, what is the most abundant greenhouse gas on our planet. It's water. It's water vapor. That's great news, because by design, we can invite the recruitment of water back into soils and recruitment of vegetation and biodiversity. So, we got some other, I get too excited. Sorry, folks.
I just wanted to add on that
Felix
too, Natalie. Just that with all of the structures that we're doing to harvest rainwater, they're the same structures that actually are our flood mitigation structures. So they have this dual purpose if well designed, and especially in flatlands. And I know the link you're going to send in the work you've done in South Sudan is a great example of that. But I think it's good to understand that it's how you design the whole system to work with the structures being linked to one another, so that it optimizes rainwater harvesting, and it ensures that the flooding is mitigated. And the outcome of all of that is that you have food production. So that's, I mean, that's constantly what you're looking at. And then you're designing it to each site, because one side of the road's going to have a different set of influences than possibly the next land over on the other side of the road. So that's where one of the places we find a lot of the big programs miss is they come in and they say, oh, we have these 3 strategies, implement them everywhere, rather than looking and saying, what is the context of the site? And including, like what you were saying, Bali, it's a partnership between the land and the people. And so the people's own unique needs are also an expression into that landscape that have to be considered. And so every site needs its own design. And I think that's where, as we start to shift our thinking away from checking boxes of how many strategies we put in the ground to how many designs were implemented, and even starting from a fractal of the design. So oftentimes with farms or communities is you do a small demonstration of a bigger design, and then they get to see it and what works well. And then from there, they expand it without your help because they see the value of it. I'll stop there. I was just adding on a little bit there of your excitement, adding a little of my excitement.
Oh, I was born excited. I can't get enough of this. And what I was going to say, you know, Warren, about the structures we're creating are flood proofing and drought proofing. Mohammed Fajreen is one of our lead engineers, who's amazing, from Indonesia. Bali, Indonesia, and Indonesian islands have a system of measured distribution of water. I think we need to really think about that term, measured distribution. How do we design so that water is taking the longest and slowest path and most pacified path, the least violent path through a landscape? There's comments, but not really questions. Actually, like, yes, demonstration. Lots of information we hold, but passing it to farmers has become a challenge. Absolutely, which I think we can overcome through demonstration. You know, regreening is people need to see it with their own eyes, especially when they're relying on their land for not only nutrition but income. You know, so there's a way we can phase in parts of a farm, but absolutely demonstration is really, really key. Any other comments?
I wanted to add to that, Natalie, is that when we talk about nature being a partner and following natural patterns, one of the natural patterns we see is that there's more biodiversity and expression of growth when water is moving slowly. So if you look high in a landscape, you're going to have less biodiversity just naturally. And then lower in the landscape, you have more expression of biodiversity as well as more production of biomass. And so that's why everybody wants bottomland mostly to grow better food, because the water's slowed down there. But we can create bottomland from the top of the system down through engineering. And I think that's something that we can kind of rethink the value of land. In the hill approach that we did with Mercy Corps in the DR Congo, we actually went to landscapes that they said were no longer viable for growing. And so we then remapped it by, just like you said, that measured distribution of water that creates that natural pattern of slowing it down so that the expression of life could happen.
Yeah, and as I always say, we don't want super highways of water. We want parking lots. So water is not clean and clear bottled water, you know, just
there is a question,
clean.
Natalie.
Oh, sorry. I'm interested in this question.
Yes.
Have a past techniques lesson to farmers, wondering if there have been any experiment with short videos for WhatsApp, TikTok. You'd be surprised that could be watched repeatedly. Warren, are you able to see this question? Thanks, Sarah.
I mean, I think you've done that really well, Natalie. You've done a lot of small videos and short videos. Like, we've not really done this officially within the resilience design context. However, if you go to the link that I put at the end of the presentation with the FSN network, you'll see that we've done videos on how to do a permagarden and how to do the training of a permagarden into the landscape. So, but I agree with you. I think short videos are a really great way to do things, but there's nothing else like being out there with a djembe and digging alongside a farmer.
Yeah. Right.
And actually saying, oh, you know, the angle, this is a ditch, this is not a bioswale. You need to angle the back, and you want to make it so there's more exposure of that water for better production. And when you do it together, is then they see it and say, I can do this. And that's when you get it, the uptake happening in the community without a program intervention.
I agree. I think we need to get that notion of not everything can be, you know, what do you call a Twitter or a little video, or so that nothing replaces that. So we need to get people get closer to the field, and obviously everything helps, you know, in terms of advocacy. But what will really help in advocacy is generating results and the evidence on results. This morning, or no, yesterday and before yesterday actually, during the weekend, we received a fantastic 4-pager from Afghanistan. I mean, these guys are rehabilitating even the whole Kurat systems, and are doing humongous work, you know, in terms of, I mean, it's mind-boggling the number of things that they're doing, protecting orchards, flood protection, diversion, link, through state-of-the-art work. I mean, it's just a combination of engineering, horticulture, irrigation, and the ancient and new thinking. So it's really exciting. But we need to tell more and more of this story, that's possible to have different way of doing restoration and agroecology, as opposed to commercial farming and as a solution to feed the world. Actually, it's not feeding the world; it's making the world dependent on so many other bad things. No, so it's the transition is going to be long, but that is irreversible. This path is a way to go. So we need to find ways to replicate and to scale up the good practices, networking this through academia, local institutions, so that gradually they will be taking over a lot of this, including in areas that are considered lost. By the way, what you see behind me is a catchment area that was part of a huge catchment rehabilitation effort.
Voli,
Really?
I don't think your camera's on.
Yes, we
Or
can
unless
see.
Okay.
No, we can see.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So this is an area that was considered irreversibly lost back, you know, in the late 80s. By year 2000, early 2000s, it was completely changed, and together with another 1 million hectares. So this was done largely through the people's own work, and this landscaping and massive rehabilitation, and some people that I think some of them are listening to this conversation. I don't want to mention names, but I've been challenging the biggest gullies ever of, you know, unimaginable, you know, with creative solutions and greening places that were just about defined as scary. And I do remember the conversation of people say, this is an area that you can't stay, and you need to move, and you need to cut, you know, you need to forget. And then another of our dear colleagues who passed away said this very interesting sentence: Volley, don't worry. By fighting stones with stones, we will bring back the water. And that's always remained in my head, you know, how in a stony moon-like landscape, by fiercely believing that it was possible to restore and to rehabilitate, things that were looking like the moon literally went back to life, like this area behind me. So this is really important, particularly for WFP staff who belong to many of these so-called broken ecosystems and difficult, almost like forgotten places. So let's learn collectively and network as much as we can, because this is the future. And hopefully, Warren, our paths will cross again soon. And yes, with Natalie, I think we are in good hands to continue the networking, but everybody is responsible to network. So continue to do that, and super happy that this session is generating also now a flurry of comments and additional interest. Unfortunately, we had 3 type of workshops in you know, going on at the same time. in headquarters. So there was probably a competition for attention, but I'm sure that we will continue to grow with this. Thank you from my side. I don't want to say anything else.
Thanks so much, Bully. I feel like Bully and Warren are kind of my silverback gorillas of regenerative regenerative vision. So I do want to say that some have more forestation than others, that's okay. Hilltop vegetation. I think Serena's going to share a Mentimeter link. I don't know how that happens. Warren might share some details on the February training. The one in October is full. But what I would love is for, that Warren and I continue and support the teams. Maybe we can think about trainings in arid zones. Somebody asked specifically about arid zones. To be honest, I saw a video when I was working with Mercy Corps in 2014 by Jeff Lawton, who's probably the most famous permaculture person in the world. He had a video called Greening the Desert. I saw that video. I got on a plane. I went to Jordan, the Palestinian area, and from there, I contacted this man called Warren Brush, and I said, I just did a permaculture design course. Is it crazy if I come to California and do another course with you? And that was when Warren became my teacher, my trainer, my mentor, and then we became partners in trying to really roll this out. So Warren is sharing the information for the February training, and I just want to. Oh, thanks, Serena. I thought that was the Mentimeter. So
yeah, it's the Mentimeter.
Thanks.
But then other links are coming. So yes, there is a Mentimeter.
Okay.
If you click the code, you can do the
and
Great.
all my comments have been as Serena. So yeah.
It was a pleasure to share
Exactly.
my profile with you,
you.
Like a double personality with Warren Brush.
Yeah. And I just want to say, thanks to everyone who joined, 90 people or more. Like everyone, it's instinctive, it's intuitive. We know that we have to rebuild and restore that which sustains us. We are soil organisms. The word human comes from the word humus. We are soil organisms, and I think everybody here cares about landscapes, about regenerative design. Oh, I see Muriel. Warren Muriel's here. Muriel took a course also with Warren in California. So then I want to aim, I'll be traveling a lot, so please be patient. But roughly once a month, I would love to bring in somebody. The next trainer will probably be around bamboo. I have many different interests. One of them is natural construction, natural building, but I really feel that bamboo has a strong role in restorative action, in stabilizing slopes, in building materials. So we'll have speakers on that. And I think that's it. We could go on and on, but I really want to thank Voli for your time, thank Warren for your time, and thank you, Serena, and Magda, whoever's helped with the IT aspect. This was the first one, which is why I was reluctant to post it on WFP Go, because I was like, oh, there's going to be thousands of people, and we haven't even figured out how to add Warren as a presenter to an internal event. We also want to join UNHCR because there's a lot of this work that can be joint between us. So I would really kind of love to open the circle so we can have collaborative discussions about how we can marry our mandates really to have landscape level resilience building. I think Voli has a different opinion on this, but the term resilience comes from ecology. Okay, so I think before we launch into all different types of other innovations, we got to kind of get back to basics. Go ahead, Wally.
Psychology, engineering, and ecology. Apparently, they are fighting each other.
And there's a three-arm wrestle over that term. Anyway, it's about systems, and it's about holistic thinking, and it's about design. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll try to share links. I'll figure out how to do all that. And yeah, I really look forward to being here as a support, and our unit and HQ on supporting, all of you, the teams around the world in integrating, going to the next level with food security through resilience and regenerative design. So Warren, did you have any last final thought?
I just want to say thank you all for your time and energy and for the really good work that you are all doing. I'm very inspired by your work as well. And I think, like you said, Vali, is like looking for those places of synergy. We're at a time where we don't, like, this is the first time in human history where we're actually going to make choices whether humans can continue on the earth or not. And so let's be smart about that and work together. It's all about collaboration and synergy. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much
Bye.
again. Really. Well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.